Neville Goddard, 1954 lectures. There's about a handful, maybe 4 from 1954. And this one is called Good Friday, Easter. And it is edited by Jan McKee, I see. So we're going to go ahead and rip right into it. You know the story of Good Friday. A man is in a garden. It's nighttime, and one called Judas comes in search of him, seemingly to betray him. He comes into the garden, and it's dark, so he asks the simple question, "Where is Jesus?" Then the voice in the dark answered, "I am he." We are told in the story they all fell to the ground. When they regained their composure, they asked the same question, "Where is Jesus?" Again, the voice answered, "I have told you that I am he." This time Judas kissed him, and the voice said to him, "Now that you have found me, let all else go, but do not let me go. And what you have to do, do quickly." Then Judas goes out and commits suicide. Now, when you read the story, you might think that the drama took place in a garden. No. That drama must take place in the mind of man. For this is all about rebirth. It takes a man, a normal man, a man of sense, but hidden in that man and bound hand and foot is the second man that rebirth loosens and lifts up. And that second man is God. So the mystery is all self, and he uses the word mystery no less than 18 times. He asked those in the Corinthians to esteem him as a steward of mystery. Then he said, "Great is the mystery, God was manifest in the flesh." Then he spoke of the greatest of all mysteries, the one hidden from the foundation of the world. Christ in you is the hope of glory. Christ in man. Not Christ in the pages of history, but God in man must be awakened, and this is the technique by which he is awakened. Now come closely with me and let me take you into the garden of your own mind. Right now, just imagine you are in a sick room of some wonderful hospital, a ward. You see the case history, you heard the verdict of the doctor, and the man seemingly is dying. What would save that man from such a verdict? What would save him? A state of health by which he would rise from that bed and become a normal, healthy person in this world. That would save him. Now look into your mind's eye and define carefully the solution of a particular problem. When you define the solution to the problem, do you know what you are actually seeing? You are seeing Jesus, for Jesus means to save. So the state that would save that man from what he is the state of health. That is his Savior. The story is, now that you have found me, M-E, capitals, let all else go, but do not let me go. In other words, let go of everything you have ever believed, but do not let go of this concept, that the man is well in spite of the evidence of your senses to the contrary. No matter what reason dictates, you hold on to Jesus, Jesus being that the man is healthy. You hold on to it and you touch it by becoming intensely aware of it. That's the only way to touch a thing. Let me tell you of something that happened only last Friday. I have a friend in this city who I met recently, and he gave me a very sad story. He was up against it. He had borrowed money and he can't pay it back. Things are just going from bad to worse. While shaving, you don't have to go into some church to find him. While shaving, I thought of him, and I instantly, while in the act of shaving, imagined I was speaking to my wife, and I said to her, remember, he's imagining while he's shaving, I was speaking to my wife, and I said to her, Isn't it wonderful, the good news concerning George? Then I allowed her, in my imagination, to say, yes, isn't it wonderful? 3 hours later, he called me to tell me it's so good he doesn't know what really to take. He said that in the immediate present, 2 wonderful jobs are offered to him. Jobs he can do and do well. Both are great and he doesn't know which one to take. Now he has another problem. I will assume that he has taken the right one, the best one, and I know that in the immediate future, George will again call me and tell me that on reflection, he could not have chosen more wisely. Neville's now done it twice for George. Didn't cost him a thing. So you look out into your mind's eye and know exactly what you want in this world. When you know what you want in place of what you are, then you are seeing your Savior, your Jesus. The story is, don't let him go, but let all else go. Disengage yourself from the whole vast belief that you formerly entertained and hold on in your imagination to the concept that you are, capital A-R-E, the man that you want to be. That will lead you toward Calvary. Calvary means fixing in your mind's eye that state, and that will lead towards Easter, or this wonderful day that we speak of as the resurrection. For you will resurrect and make alive the state that began only as a concept. If you remain faithful to the concept, you will be led right into the fulfillment of that state. If you remain faithful to the concept, you will be led right into that state. It is called in the Bible rebirth. Now here's the story. He said, except you be born again, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. The wise man said, how is it possible man my age may once enter into my mother's womb and be born again? He said, you, a master of Israel, and you do not know? Except you be born of water and the Spirit, ye can in no wise enter the kingdom of heaven. Then he gives this clue. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. As Moses lifted up the serpent, do you think a man lifted up a brazen serpent as told in the story, and that everyone who looked on it was instantly healed, and those who do not look were not cured? It's not any serpent. A serpent is a symbol. Everything that you're looking at with these 2 robbers right here is a symbol for something more. Everything you can see is a symbol for something more that's coming from within. Everything, but everything, I'm telling you, everything is a symbol. Just close these, and you can smell them for what they are. You can definitely sense everything that you might imagine when you close the door to your closet and you just imagine what it is that you are seeing. Do you want these things upgraded? You just imagine differently. Everything outside of you is only a symbol for your imagining. You can change your imagining, and therefore all the symbols change. Are you driving a 1986 Yugo and you don't want to be? Drive something else. Drive something newer, less plasticky. A serpent is a symbol of the power of endless self-reproduction. For the serpent sheds its skin, and yet it does not die. Man must be like the serpent who grows and outgrows. So I must now learn the art of dying that I may live, rather than, I would say, killing that I may survive. I die by laying down all that I now believe. Is that easy? Are you willing to do it? I die by laying down all that I now believe, and I lift myself up to the belief that I am what I want to be. That's how I do it. Now, this is how a man is born of water and of the Spirit. If I told you now that an assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact, that is a truth. That is water. But water is not enough. You must catch the spirit of it and apply that truth. Well, if I know that, if I assume that I am the man I want to be and persist in that assumption, I would gradually become that. If I have that knowledge, that's marvelous. But do not do it is to try to bring this being to birth by water only. We are told this is the only, we are told this is the one who came by water and the blood, not by water only, but by water and the blood. In other words, I have the knowledge, but I cannot bring to birth my ideal by bare knowledge. I must put it into action. I must do it, capital D, capital O. Then when I do, capital D, capital O, it, I take my Savior and I crystallize him by the doing. This is the story of our wonderful Easter. Today, our churches are bursting with new finery, but not bursting with new men. And we are told in the story, put on the Lord Jesus Christ, put on the new man. Well, how will I put on a new man? It's like saying to the boy, put on manhood, or saying to the tree, put on foliage. It comes from within. Out. It comes from within out, and man puts it on from the outside. That's typical. You can't put it on from the outside, for he is within you. For great is the mystery. The one hidden from the foundation of the earth, Christ in you, capitals, is the hope of glory. Christ in you is the hope of glory. Not some Christ external to yourself, but the one in you. That is your hope. That is your only glory. So the great mystery is that at Bethlehem, God became as we are, that at Calvary, we may become as he is. And Calvary is the opportunity that comes every day in the life of a man. When you walk the earth and you see anyone in need, ask yourself what would be the solution to that individual's problem. Just what would it be? You can grant it. Literally. Literally, you can grant it. If you know who you really, capitals, are, you can grant it. Just as I granted it to George, I didn't raise one finger to get George a job. I didn't send him on a job. I didn't give him anything. I simply turned in my mind's eye to my wife, who was not physically present, and simply stated, "Isn't it wonderful, the news concerning George?" And I allowed her to say in my imagination, "Yes, isn't it wonderful?" And then I continued with my project of a simple shaving. That is simply lifting up the serpent in the wilderness. For I raised myself from the knowledge that George was unemployed and struggling to the knowledge that he is employed. I did nothing more. I shed the skin like a serpent. I dropped off all that I formerly believed concerning George and began to live, capitals, on a higher level concerning George. And so I lived it, and so made it real that in 3 hours he called and gave me this exciting news. You can do the same thing with anyone in this world. When you do it daily, you die daily, as the prophet said. I die daily. I'll give you an update on that gal with her 2 kids in front of the store I shop at, in the grocery store. I mentioned on a video, I don't know, a dozen or 2 dozen videos ago. These go by fast for me because I do a lot of them. But I haven't seen her since. And I don't know, that must have been at least 2 weeks, maybe more. And I shared with you the I die daily concept and self-persuasion, I call it. In this particular lecture, Neville's calling it the raising of the serpent. It's the same thing. Imagine lovingly. Persuade myself, my old self died, my new self lived, that this gal and her 2 children found a great new opportunity for themselves. I haven't seen her since. That's the update. It's this very simple thing that costs you nothing. Well, first it costs you a bit of concern for another. If you don't have that capacity, go back to the beginning on the co-creation bookshelf and start there. Just start again, and then come all the way back and catch up. And then if you're not concerned about anybody else yet, go back to the beginning and go through. It's not just you here, all right? Oh, we have to have fun with this, all right? I'm going to start with this paragraph again. You can do anything, you can do the same thing with anything in this world. When you do it daily, you die daily, as the prophet said. I die daily. Man waits for some little event called death, and he thinks that is dying. That isn't really dying, for the simple reason that that kind of death does not bring about a transformation. As Neville has said many times, there's no transformation in death. That was something that bugged me all the years in my Seth classes we were having in my living room. It was always bugging me. I was like, once we're not here, this would knock on my noggin. Once we're not here, like literally not here, the ability to change as we're changing during this class is going to be something we're going to miss. And to me, that was the words to describe it. But to me, what it meant was that our transformational concept is active while applying it. And we were applying the Seth material as an example at that time. But for what it's worth, I knew that after the class, we wouldn't be able to transform. And of course, my teacher left the party. The class disbanded after a while. She was a main flux, a main center of force, if you will, that I kept it together because we were always entertained by that material. But the point is that I knew inside of me that after it wouldn't be as easy to transform as it was while in the throes of like what we're doing here together. We're reading these lectures, we're listening to them, we're applying them, we're doing them, we're doing these exercises. That's where transformation happens. It doesn't happen in just the thinking, it happens in the doing, which is what we are doing together. Man waits for some little event called death, and he thinks that is dying. That isn't really dying, for the simple reason that that kind of death does not bring about a transformation. For there is no transformation in a physical death, but there is transformation in mentally dying and dying daily. So if you have learned the art of dying, you have learned the art of living. I'm telling you, it feels, this art he's describing feels like, it feels like you have no balance, but you're completely in balance. It feels like you have no security, but you're fully secure. It feels like you're not healthy, but you're completely healthy. It feels like you are not in the chips, but you're totally wealthy. And you know it. You know it. You just know completely, confidently, you just know it. I don't know. I don't know what skydiving feels like. It might just feel like just pressured this way up under you. But I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. You just go from die daily to die daily. Because you're constantly in a giving flux. But in that giving, you're receiving constantly. Opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. It's like this wash of the tide. It goes and it comes. For man is immortal and must die endlessly. For life was a creative idea, and it will find itself only in changing form. If I do not change and grow and outgrow, then I know nothing of the mystery of Easter. For Easter is really the greatest of all mysteries. It's when man awakens within himself from his birth at Bethlehem, and he awakens as God. That's the story of Easter. So let us not perpetuate this thing by our finery, which is lovely. There's not a thing wrong with getting new clothes and new hats and all the lovely things in the world, but today it has become almost a parade of what is new rather than the new man. So when I put on the new man, I put him on by daily exercising him in this way, by becoming intensely aware. You could at this very moment extend your feelings and trust your touch and participate in all the flights of your imagination. And do not be afraid of your sensitivities. When I become intensely aware that I am hearing what I want to hear and am actually touching that I want to touch, virtue goes out of me. And the thing touched takes on the blessing which was determined by the mood that possessed me as I imagined that I touched it. If I now touch anything, it must become crystallized in my world, bearing witness to the mood that possessed me at the moment that I touched it. So unless we be born of this knowledge and the application of this knowledge, we cannot enter this eternal state called the kingdom of heaven. So now you have a little of the knowledge, go out and apply it. When you apply it, this is what happens, and this is a mystical fact. It was said of the one called Judah, who is this one who comes with his garments dyed in the sap of wine? Who takes this vestige and bathes it in the blood of grapes, and takes his colt and ties it to a choice vine, and his eye red with wine, and his teeth white with milk. You are told, in the very last act, they placed a wine-colored robe upon Jesus. You are told that Judah took his robe and bathed it in the blood of grapes. Now, when I took what I did for George, I was actually weaving my wine-colored robe. I must weave that robe if I would awaken. It's called in the Bible the wedding garment. It is called the wine-colored robe. It is called the amethyst in the New Testament, the amethyst in the Old Testament. It's not an amethyst. It's not a robe I weave on the outside, but when I live a life according to these truths, I'm actually weaving a wine-colored aura around my being, which then enables me to function consciously on higher levels of my own being. Without such a robe, I cannot function beyond my present physical state. But when I live this life according to these truths, you can't see it with the physical eye, but I weave my robe, and those who have the eye opened will see me as one of their own. And I'm not going to carry some little insignia to tell them who I am. I radiate who I am when they see my garment. So when we are told Judah comes and he takes his wonderful robe and he bathes it in the blood of grapes, it's not a man who takes off a robe. For the garment in the Bible is what a man wears mentally. So if I take my mind and I apply it, actually all day long, but not confining it to one simple little thing as I did for George, but in the course of a day, I have unnumbered opportunities to weave this wonderful robe by simply hearing good news for others. If I hear only good news for others and trust what I hear as though I heard it, I am actually taking my robe and bathing it in the blood of grapes. You wonder why he's called the vine? He said, I am the vine, and ye are the branches. Unless the branch be rooted in the vine, it has no life. Well, every man in the world is a branch, rooted in me, the vine, and he ends in me as I am rooted in and end in God. Now, that can be said of every man in the world. While you look at me and can hear me, you too can say it. Although I have just made the claim, you are rooted in me, you can claim that I am rooted in you, and I end in you as you are rooted in and end in God. If you know it, then it is your duty to lift up every man in this world. Yes, not only to the homeless person you might see, but to the city you're in, to the block you live on, to the street, the block, the city, the county, the state. You can do it to every man in this world. Literally. Not one must be discarded. Everyone must be redeemed, and your life is the process by which this redemption is brought to pass. Discard no man. Every man can be changed, and you have the power to change him by taking the man and seeing him as he seemingly is, and then asking what he would like to be instead of what he seems to be. To me, in this art of manifesting and getting conscious control of your creations, this is the simplest and easiest place to start and see results. When you imagine lovingly for others, you see it so fast. It is the easiest, simplest way to get this pump primed. Imagine lovingly for your brother, for your sister, for anybody outside of yourself. When you're emotionally attached to the outcome like you are with yourself, it's not the same. But when you see it in action in others, you know and you see the validity of that action, in the doing of it. You can't deny the results. When you know what he would like to be, then you imagine that he is that being already. Turn to a loved one and commune with the loved one concerning this man, just as though it were a fact, like he did with his wife in the mirror shaving. When you do it, trust it, touch it, and believe it. And I will tell you that man will become the embodiment of what you have imagined him to be. Yes, very true. This is Easter, and Easter comes not once a year. Easter is a daily opportunity to simply die that you may live. For here it is said, if any man would come for me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. Any man. Well, how would I take up my cross and follow after this idea? First, I am told I must deny myself. Usually, man thinks that means giving up something he loves, giving up the pleasures of the table, or giving up something of which he is especially fond. It hasn't a thing to do with giving up external things. It is a man must deny himself, and a man's true self is made up of the sum total of all that he believes, all that he accepts as true, all that he consents to. So if I consent to a man dying, then I must deny that concept, that self, and put it in its place, the embodiment of a healthy being. When I do that, I can follow after this idea. You can take this principle and apply it to everything in this world. If it's not some tangible thing on earth you want, take some noble concept of a man, take a man that you would love to see in this world. Dream of that man actually walking this earth and identify yourself with that man. Again, dream of that man actually walking this earth and identify yourself with that man. Associate yourself in your imagination with that as if you were he. When you actually feel that I am he and continue in that state, then things begin to unfold to bear witness to the truth of your assumption. You try it. What does it take a little kid to try it? Ask any little kid to try this. They will be off to the races, and you know it. Especially for you that are parents. You know it's true. They'll just go right into it without hesitation, without any blocks, without any doubts, without any fears. They will imagine themselves a fireman. They'll imagine themselves a doctor. They'll imagine themselves an astronaut. They'll imagine themselves anything. And they'll do it fully with reckless abandon. So remember, Easter is the art of dying that you may live. And this reminds me of that wonderful poem of the death of Abdullah and what he said at the end of it all. He appeared among all the mortals, and they were weeping and kissing him and kissing his worn out body. And he turned to them and said, I am not the thing you kiss. Seize your tears and let it lie. It was mine. It is not I. Goodbye. Wow. Good Friday Easter. Whoa. That's another definition for Easter. Completely. I love it. Let us go into the silence and just imagine that. We easily imagine lovingly for others all the livelong day. Every time we see somebody, we imagine what they might be wanting. You're not going to miss the mark if you just imagine that that person jogging likes health. I see them completely healthy. I am hearing them being happy about their new health. And I'm high-fiving them. I'm hugging them. This is to a jogger going by your car. What does that cost? I gave you the example of the homeless person. What does that cost you? Imagining lovingly is I die daily, that I may live. Good stuff. Do your homework, go into the silence, do that for 2 minutes. All right, we're going to see you in the next one. Neville Goddard, The Pruning Shears of Revision, 1954. We've got a couple lectures from 1954. This morning's subject is the pruning shears of revision. I firmly believe that if you will wisely and daily use the pruning shears of revision, that you will find there is no objective beyond your ability to realize. This is the most powerful of one of the most powerful of all of his lessons that he brought to us. And I mean that seriously, no objective beyond your ability to realize. When I was a boy of 7, a lady said to me, I've had a vision concerning you. I will make it now very, very clear to you. I do not know what it is you are going to do, but I've been shown you will do something that through the centuries, after you are gone, man will not undo it. I can see it through the centuries. You will grow in stature long after you've gone. And then 3 men will be mentioned in hundreds of years to come, and you will be one of the 3 when something is discussed that was done for man. I feel that this morning's subject, that this could be it. Remember, this is before the 4 mystical experiences. He experienced this starting in 1959. So at this point, he's pretty profoundly, he feels very strong about this. And it is profound, the pruning shears of revision. So let's keep going. I feel that this morning's subject, that this could be it. That if I never said another word and you heard it and believed it and really used it, this would be the planting that would spread from us here that tomorrow could not undo. For it is magic, this pruning shears of revision. It really is not only the achievement of objectives, but if you do it daily, it will awaken in you the spirit of Jesus, which is continual forgiveness of sin. Let's break those words down for fun of it right now. Sin is missing the mark. Forgiveness is imagining lovingly. Continual is obvious. Continually imagining lovingly and hitting the mark. You know somebody who's not hitting the mark? You imagine lovingly and you see them making the mark, being employed, taking advantage of that new opportunity in their life, their health, their wealth, their love. They're missing the mark, they're in sin because they want to hit that mark. And you imagine lovingly, which means you're forgiving. You're doing it for another, someone outside of yourself, and you're seeing this work wonderfully. But then you can also apply it to yourself. I recommend seeing it work for others. Just raise that tide all over the place. Continual forgiveness of sin. Imagining lovingly, so we all hit the mark. In this teaching, the sinner should always go free. You will never condemn him. For when the Spirit is awake in you, you will realize in him there is no condemnation, only forgiveness. And forgiveness is not as man of the world thinks, when he omits the actual execution of his revenge. What we mean by forgiveness, the identification of the other, that we would forgive with the ideal that other wants to embody in the world. And so we do to him what we expect or would like the world to do to us. So whatever I myself would like to embody, that is the vision that I must hold of every man that I meet in my world. That no man is to be discarded, every man is to be redeemed. And my life is the process whereby that redemption is brought about. And I do it by simply identifying the other with the ideal I want to externalize in my world. Now, we will go back to the 2nd of Genesis. It is said, and God placed man in the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. Now, when you read the story, you think it happened thousands of years ago. I've come to tell you, it is now. You are now in the Garden of Eden. And you think you are shut out or banished. You are in it. And the garden is your mind. But you need, like every gardener, you need pruning shears. For you have slept, as you are told in the 2nd chapter, having slept, weeds have appeared in the garden, and the weeds are revealing themselves by the conditions and circumstances of life. For your garden is always projecting itself on the screen of space, and you can see by looking carefully at your world what you allow to grow in the garden of God. But you have a mission, you have a purpose. It is not to amass a fortune. You can do it if you want to. It's not to be famous. It's not to become some mighty power, but simply to tend the garden of God. That's your purpose. You are placed in the garden to dress it and to keep it, that only the lovely things grow in the garden of God. Now, every man in the world is rooted in you who look out and see that world. Every man is rooted in me. He ends in me as I am rooted in and end in God. Because he is rooted in me, he cannot bear other than the nature the root allows. So he is in me, and any changes desired in the outer world can be brought about only if I change the source of the thing I see growing in my world. You see yonder fields? Don't be surprised when you see sesamum. The sesamum was sesamum. The corn was corn. The silence and the darkness knew, so is a man's fate born. So don't judge it, because you are the source of the thing that you are beholding. Now think about that. That sentence is very, very profound, because it falls back, of course, on our same continual lesson. Whenever you point the finger at another, 3 are pointing back at you. You are the source of the thing you are beholding. Now turn within and prune it by using these pruning shears of revision. Now this is how we do it. At the end of my day, I review the day. I don't judge it. I simply review it. I look over the entire day, all the episodes, all the events, all the conversations, all the meetings, and then as I see it clearly in my mind's eye, I rewrite it. I rewrite it and make it conform to the ideal day I wish I had experienced. I take scene after scene and rewrite it, revise it. And having revised my day, then in my imagination, I relive that day, the revised day. And I do it over and over in my imagination until this seeming imagined state begins to take on, to me, the tones of reality. Now, as you begin this, let's say it's just your very, very first time, and this seems confusing. As you're falling asleep, give yourself an extra little while. I'm the kind of person that when I go to bed, it's time to go fall asleep very fast because I've made a decision to go to bed, and I end up going fast. So it takes an effort to go to bed early for me. But for myself, I'll get up in the middle of the night, study for a while, read for a while, then I'll go back, and then I'll be able to do this task right here very easily. If you're doing this for the first time, then just go ahead and take one item of your day. Try and think back throughout your entire day. If you can remember all the events of your day in reverse order, then you can pick one, or pick the goal here is as you first start, pick one. Relive that experience the way you would rather have it seen gone or experienced it, however you want to say this. You relive it, you revise it. And your new memory of the day is going to be the revised version, but you can repeat the revision to whatever happened. It's going to be your imagination. There are no boundaries here. Whatever that event happened in your day, revise it, whatever it takes until it feels real, until it takes on the tones of reality, of having really happened. The other idea, and I'm sure he's going to mention it, be angry but sin not, means if during the day you got mad at somebody, because that's what naturally happens. Somebody did something and you became angry and you expressed that anger. Sin not means don't take that to bed. It means that you revise the event to your satisfaction. It doesn't matter what the event was. It doesn't matter how you revise it. That's not the point. It's that you do revise it to what you would satisfy you. So you're sinning not. You're not missing the mark. You're hitting the mark. Even in your revision, you're hitting the mark. Try it with one thing. Try it with two things. Try it with several things. But this is as you're going to bed. Give yourself that time. Think back in your day. If you grab one item, that's enough. You don't need to go crazy here. You don't need to categorize every single hour of the day. But as you get better at this and you practice it, you will be able to go in reverse all the way to the beginning of your day. In the beginning of this, just do one thing. Grab one highlight. Revise it until it feels natural. It seems that it's real, that I actually did experience it, and I have found from experience that these revised days, if really lived, will change my tomorrows. Fact. Fact. When I meet people tomorrow that today disappointed me, they will not tomorrow, for in me, I have changed the very nature of that being. And having changed him, he bears witness tomorrow of the change that took place within me. Just try it once, you're not going to believe it. Totally, totally true. It is my duty to take this garden and really make it a garden by daily using the pruning shears of revision. I know from experience it will not only bring about these objectives and bring about these changes, but the glorious thing is it awakens in you who use it the Spirit of Jesus. And you find yourself then not justifying, but forgiving. And you will realize that freedom and forgiveness are indissolubly linked. Freedom and forgiveness are indissolubly linked. You cannot be free and not forgive. Remember, forgive means imagine lovingly. For the one that you would bind and judge and condemn anchors you by your own judgment of him, for he is in you. Remember the fingers. And so by identifying him with the ideal you want to really realize, you free yourself. You are told, forgive, and you shall be forgiven. Forgive not, and then you shall not be forgiven. If you imagine lovingly for others, they shall imagine lovingly for you. Everyone is you pushed out. If you don't, you won't. Forgive, and you shall be forgiven. Forgive not, and then you shall not be forgiven. Remember the Lord's Prayer. Trespasses. It's automatic. It can't be otherwise. For the whole springs from you who behold it. The whole. And as you begin to practice it, the very Spirit arouses itself within you, and you know that you are He that others spoke about and thought lived 2,000 years ago. I am He. So when you realize it through actual knowledge. You know it, no argument. You don't tell others, you know that you are He. You don't have to go around bragging this business. No one's going to believe it anyway. Literally, no one's going to believe what the hell you're saying. They're going to look at you like you're crazy. If you go around saying, when you see me, you see my Father, who's going to look at that with any kind of appreciation? Besides you and me here. And even most of you, I don't know. If you go around saying, I am He, that's not necessary whatsoever. It's all about the doing. So when you realize it, I'm going to repeat, you realize it through actual knowledge. You know it, no argument. You don't tell others. You know that you are He. And then you will read the words in the 9th of Hebrews, He appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of Himself. When you self-persuade while you're imagining lovingly for another, you just sacrificed the self you were that used to believe the other was downtrodden. Now that you lifted him up, you became the new birth of the new self in a new man that now is totally accepting of the reality of the new man you imagine lovingly for. The old man, the old you is dead, gone, buried, history. Let the dead bury the dead. You imagine lovingly for another and you self-persuade, that other is now the new man, you're the new man. The dead, his old self, and the dead, your old self, let the dead bury the dead. That doesn't matter anymore. That is not our concern. He appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of Himself, and you will know you are the one that put away sin by the sacrifice of self, and by the sacrifice of self. It's not being a brave one who throws himself in the line of fire to protect a brother. It doesn't mean one who gives his body to be burned, one who is nailed on a cross. But the self of man is the sum total of all that man believes and consents to as true. So that's the self that is sacrificed. Again, when you self-persuade that friend of yours is lifted up, is now employed when they weren't, is now in love when they weren't, is now married when they weren't, is now healthy when they weren't, is now wealthy when they weren't. Each of those is a sacrifice of self when you believe for a friend that they are now in that new position. You sacrifice that self. You give yourself so that they may live. You die daily. I die daily. I believe you are that new man. I die in believing that you are that new man. I can see it. I am in celebration of it. I have no problem sacrificing myself. It doesn't cost me anything. I see your new success, and it's amazing. Congratulations. I am very happy for you. It doesn't cost me, but a self I used to believe is now gone. I am the new person, the new me, the new man that believes in your new success. You'll have to sacrifice that self now. You'll take up this subconscious transmit. It's coming to you now. You'll pick it up. You'll go with it. You'll feel like you're on a skateboard or a bike and you got to get that balance. It's new. Big deal. So what? It's new. Go with it. Let the old self go. You're the new man. I am the new man. Together, we agree on this new. I heard of this lady, and she would make some man a wonderful wife, and she is unwed. She desires to be the companion of a great noble person, but she is unwed. I heard that. That becomes a part of myself. That's my knowledge. I must sacrifice that self, that aspect of my being be as happy as I am and those in my world are. For that's the self I must sacrifice and put away sin. For sin to the mystic means missing the mark. It doesn't mean the violation of certain codes, unless, of course, you now have a mark and the violation fell short. But sin to the mystic is simply having an aim in life and failing to realize it. So when you miss the mark, you have sinned. So he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself, and knowing that himself is only all that he consents to, all that he accepts, all that he believes to be true, then what I am believing concerning that one, he is unemployed and he can't find a job, ? I'm believing it. Now put away that sin where he is missing his mark, and then by the putting away of the sin, I do it only by the sacrifice of myself. And myself is that belief, so I now revise. I can't say, well, I will no longer believe he is unemployed. I believe he is employed. To the comment of the previous gal who wanted to be married, a wonderful wife, same thing. I don't think we unpacked that. He went straight to the unemployed man who's now employed. I do it by the pruning shears of revision. I bring before my mind's eye and I congratulate him on his good fortune because he is now gainfully employed. Here, while he's shaving, for crying out loud. In the shower. Hey, there's more porcelain in the bathroom, so you can do it there too. I allow him to accept my congratulations because I do not see a man unemployed. I see him employed, and he knows he is in my mind's eye, for in that scene I have pruned him from the unemployed state and once more reshaped that branch that grows in the garden of God. Tomorrow, people will see him as they could not see him. Tomorrow, people will see him as they could not have seen him before the pruning that took place within me, and he will be gainfully employed. That one is unwell, you prune that branch. You don't accept one thing in the world as final unless it conforms to the ideal you want to realize in the world, but you do it daily. If you do not prune it daily, you will get out of the habit, then weeds will grow. Every man who really is a gardener, who calls himself a gardener in the garden of God, for every day is the opportunity to really prune the tree. This wonderful tree. This wonderful tree. And so everyone that you meet is a branch rooted in the vine that you are. And you are that special tree in the garden of God. A tree bearing life, a tree bearing fruit for the food of the nations. You are that one. If you take me seriously tonight, do not let the sun descend upon any vexation of the day. Just look at it. Don't deny it. Don't duck it. Look at it that you may prune it and then reshape it. Take the conversations with your friends today. Were they pleasant? Were they pleasant? Were they arguments? No matter what it is, were they negative? Then rewrite the script. And just imagine the conversation to have taken place that now you are rewriting for the first time. And it will take place for everything in your world that you behold. Though it appears without, it is within, in your imagination. And this wonderful imagination of yours is Christ Jesus. Imagination is the actual habitation of every created thing. No matter what you see in the world, it springs from your imagination. So that's where you go. That's the workshop, the garden of God. Excuse me. And now you have a mission. You have a purpose in life. It's a noble purpose. Because you have been selected to really become the chief gardener in the garden of God. And in the garden, you must have pruning shears. And pruning shears is revision. You simply revise, and as you revise the day, you repeal the day. For the day is not slipping into the past. It does not recede as people think. It is always advancing into the future to confront you, either pruned or in some strange weed-like state. So it's entirely up to us. I hope that every man and woman here today will take me seriously and start this day pruning your garden, pruning your mind. I know before I leave this city in a matter of 2 weeks that you will be able to tell me of the new things that spring in your world or that spring from the pruned tree that is your own lovely imagination. You try it. Then you will know what Blake meant when he said, in heaven, the only art of living is forgetting and forgiving. The only art of living is complete forgetfulness by putting something in its place. No vacuum, but putting something in its place. So when you read these strange stories that you read in the daily press, you simply ignore them. To us, whatever, Facebook, social media, the tube, whatever. You simply ignore them. If it's not between you and your objective, remember the 3 fundamentals we just went over. Self-observation. Definition of your objective. Detachment. You must at least have the self-observation so you can have a definition of your objective. Once you have that definition of objective, all that detachment means is you detach from the old self and become that new self that is your objective. And to get there, you ignore any noise that's trying to come at you from the side. If it's not in line with that objective, with your basic fundamental, it does not deserve your time. It doesn't deserve your attention. It doesn't deserve it at all because it's not between you and your objective that you are. That new you, the new man that you imagine yourself to be. Everything else is noise. Turn it off. So when you read these strange stories that you read in the daily press, you simply ignore them. They mean nothing. Men who are calling themselves leaders, shepherds of the flock, they excommunicate. Not just one religion, all religions. The leaders take it upon themselves to excommunicate. Not knowing nothing is to be discarded. Not a thing in the world can you discard, for it is forever. But it can be pruned and made to conform to the ideal image. The man who would not revise his day either does not know it, or he has lost the vision of that life into the likeness of which it is the true labor of the Spirit of Jesus that transformed this life. So you don't discard them. In the current issue of Time magazine, there is that noble soul who is known to us as Spinoza. Baruch D. Spinoza, who has given so much to the world of philosophy, so much everyone has been enriched because he walked the earth. And here, 300 years later, the ex-premier of Israel, Ben Gurion, has asked the leading rabbis today to rescind that excommunication of 300 years ago. And they tell this noble soul today that they cannot rescind the works of their forefathers. That the curse remains forever, and you should read that silly, silly curse as it's printed in the current issue of Time magazine. They call upon the angels to curse him as though angels would curse. They call upon everything to blast him. You could not walk within 4 cubits of the man's shadow. No one should talk to him. No one should show him kindness. No one should write him and never read anything he ever has to say. And that's 300 years ago. The rabbis who so cursed him have long been forgotten, and if they do live, they live only by reason of their curse. And no one knows really who they really are. But you can't forget it. But you can't forget if you read in this world the works of Spinoza. Everyone in this audience possibly has used one of his phrases. Did you know it was he who said, nature abhors a vacuum? Now you use it, I use it, but what is the source of it? It was Spinoza. For here was this giant of a mind that after 300 years, little minds who think they're leading the flock, they call themselves shepherds. They should go back and read well the book of Jeremiah. You shepherds who spoil my vines, and you who have come into my garden, and you have taken my vines, now it bears no grape and it bears no leaf, and the garden of Jerusalem now has become a weed. Read it in Jeremiah, how he cries out because shepherds, who call themselves shepherds, are blind leaders of the blind. You take me this morning at my word, you owe me nothing. It costs you not a thing to come here this morning. You come, you give me your time, and I give you my time, but you go out and try it. And start this day pruning that wonderful imagination of yours. Do you know someone that is evil? Stop knowing it by bringing him before your mind's eye and carry on with him the most wonderful conversation in the world with a tender spirit, a loving spirit, and believe in the reality of this communion, because if you really do it, you are entering the kingdom of heaven. For you enter heaven by a loving, knowing communion with a friend. Remember, evil, definition of that word is also basically missing the mark. Evil and doubt, I would add fear, all have the same concept. They're all trying to draw your attention away from the mark. That's all evil is. Again, back to your self-observation. Definition of your objective is your mark. When you're not aimed at that, that would be something that is evil, trying to get you from that mark. Doubt is also something that tries to steer you from that mark. Sin is missing the mark. You have an objective and you're not hitting it, you're sinning. Something's trying to get your attention away from it, that's evil. Something up here trying to get your doubt, that's basically the same thing, trying to make you miss the mark. Come back to your objective. Turn off that noise. Turn off the evil. Turn off the doubt. Turn off the fear. You know someone that is evil, that's full of doubt and fear, you imagine lovingly. You imagine with him the most wonderful conversation in the world. With a tender spirit, a loving spirit. And believe in the reality of this communion, because if you really do it, you are entering the kingdom of heaven. For you enter heaven by a loving, knowing communion with a friend. So make him a friend if he is a lovely one, no matter what he is. You can prune him, and then as you prune him, you are doing the work which you were sent to do for man. And you are that man. You are placed this day in the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. Don't let it continue growing weeds in your world. And if you have gone into self-reflection, self-contemplation, observation, and you don't feel a purpose, there's quite a bit of purpose in what we just read. I mean, quite a bit of purpose. You don't need to join some nonprofit to find purpose. You have purpose in this garden already. Plenty of purpose. It will lead you to more of your own purpose. Again, if you don't feel you're finding one in your self-reflection, self-observation. You are absolutely responsible for every being you meet in this world. That's your responsibility. That goes for the cashier at the grocery store. That goes for the waitress at the restaurant, the waiter. That goes for the gas attendant. In the gas station you go and you pay money for your gas or whatever you're doing. Every single interaction. You go to the hardware store. You have cashiers, you have salespeople. Wherever you are, these people are in your garden. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in front of you. It's your responsibility. Just like the teacher who told you of, just like the teacher we told you of who took this little child that was just about to be expelled. No, the child is not expelled because she heard what you are hearing this morning. So she brought before her mind's eye the child that the principal, the psychiatrist, and all the faculty had agreed unanimously to expel her on her 16th birthday. For she was rude, she was crude, she was unethical, and she went home on a Sunday night and brought that child before her mind's eye and communed with her and saw in her a tender child, a considerate child, a loving child. The next day, Monday, in class, she expressed all the kindness of that revision of the night before. One night. One person. And 10 days later, when it was seen and witnessed by all the faculty and the psychiatrist, another meeting was called and they repealed their verdict of 10 days before, and the child is not expelled. She still sits in the George Washington High School in New York City, which is considered an excellent school. And so there she is. Somebody wrote in the comment, I think I saw this YouTube video, I was looking at the comments, and somebody wrote, I hope she's not still sitting there, or something to that effect. With no black marks against her, because one teacher sat in the audience, as you are here, and she believed. What I hope everyone here will believe. And she redeemed a branch of her own tree. She didn't realize the child was herself. She saw up to that very moment all the children that she taught in pure objectivity. Blind man sees the world objective to himself, something detached from himself. When man begins to awake, he sees everything subjectively related. Everything he meets is part of himself. And what he does not now understand, still he knows that it is related by affinity to some as yet unrealized force in his own being. So he doesn't discard it. He knows his life is the process by which he will redeem it, and he redeems it by using the pruning shears of revision. What a wonderful, wonderful story. The student, one person, one teacher. This is by far one of the most profound lectures of all of Neville's work. It's at the top, right on the top shelf. Very much the top 5, easily. And there are some good ones out there, man. There's some good ones we're going to be going over. And we've gone over, believe it, believe it. But this one is very, very profound. Just do it. Just do it. So I feel that if after 50 years of walking this earth, that this is what that lady saw when I was but 7, I could really close the eye on 3 dimensions at any moment, knowing you will not disprove it. You may never use them, but you will never disprove this art of revision. For any man who will try it will prove it to his own satisfaction that he can that he can rise beyond the wildest dream of men, and rising, he awakens the spirit of forgiveness. Yeah, 50 years, 1954. He was born in 55, so he's 49 years old when he gave this lecture. What a powerful sentence that is right there. Oh my gosh. I must repeat it just because it's so profound. I think it was 2 sentences. So I feel that if after these 50 years of walking this earth, and again, he could have, as he says right in the beginning, he could have left the party right after this lecture and it's over. It's done. His work is done. But thank goodness, 17 more years, at least, maybe 18, considering 49 to 67. So I feel that if after these 50 years of walking this earth, that this is what the lady saw when I was but 7, I could really close the eye on 3 dimensions at any moment, knowing you will not disprove it. You may never use them, but you will never disprove this art of revision. And any man who will try it will prove it to his own satisfaction, that he can rise beyond the wildest dream of men. And rising, he awakens the spirit of forgiveness. He will rise in the early stages in the successful venture. He will increase his income. He will do all these things. But he will realize that after a little while, that wasn't the purpose. They were only toys to tickle him, toys to amuse him until he awoke within himself the Spirit of Jesus. Then he sees an entirely different mission, not the amassing of wealth, but the redeeming of society. The redeeming of every man in the world. He comes to do his Father's will, and we are told in the 6th chapter of John, this is my Father's will, that all that he has given me, I should lose nothing, but I should raise it up again. Lose nothing. No, you don't excommunicate. You don't rub out. You simply raise it up again, and you raise it up, you raise yourself up, and the journey is forever. You are moving up an infinite vertical line in your own wonderful imagination. And you only move up by lifting others up. What does it cost you? You only move up by lifting others up. Period. Blind men think they can save themselves, and because they think they can save themselves and discard the rest. The blind man also said this hundreds of years ago. He saved as he saved others. Himself he cannot save. I say to you, that is a false statement. It was put into the mouth of the Pharisee, put into the mouth of the Sanhedrin, the leaders who thought they were leaders. But I tell you, a man saves himself by and only by the saving of his fellow men. There is no other way of saving self other than by saving the real self. And every man is rooted in you who observes men. And so don't discard, remember, raise them up. Prune the tree and become the real gardener in the garden of God. Take anything. You have a child today. We took all the requests this morning. There were dozens and dozens of requests this morning. Everyone must be answered. None must be discarded. Don't say one is impossible. There's nothing impossible to your imagination, and your imagination is Christ Jesus. I can only imagine that there are dozens of requests were for imaginings of loveliness. And can you imagine if one person, if just one faithfully imagines lovingly for you, what that impact is? But can you imagine a room? I don't know what happened here. I'm sure we'll come across it sooner or later. But this dozens and dozens of requests this morning, everyone must be answered. With him, all things are possible. Use him. Stir him. Wake him from his sleep. He has been sleeping through the centuries because he has slept. He has dreamed into being all these strange, misshaped states. For the world only bears witness to the use or misuse of imagination. As we are told, he is the only thing in the world. What he is, what he is the only thing in the world, ? Your imagination. For it is the habitation of every created thing, and by it all things are made, and without it is nothing made that is made. So use it wisely, use it lovingly. And anytime you use your imagination lovingly on behalf of another, you are at that moment literally mediating God to man. Imagination is the redemptive power of the world, and you are actually mediating God to man by using it in a loving, wonderful way. Pruning Shears of Revision. Neville throwing down. Wow. During the years giving the Seth classes, we would talk about the past and the future and the present. And I know Neville in this, he has said that the past doesn't recede, but that the present is falling towards into the future, because when you revise, you're changing your present view of the day, which means you're changing the past, which doesn't exist. But I also believe the future doesn't exist. But what he said there was, as you revise, it's falling into a different future, which is also another way of saying you're in a different probable reality, which those Seth people who read Seth, all of this is about probable realities. And in the Seth material, you're constantly looking at a new reality, which is all his works are done, same thing, but a new reality has built into itself. If you're the new man, you have built in that new past that goes with it and that new future that goes with it, but they are coming from the present point. This is taking this and pushing the bubble, pushing the envelope a little bit. Everything's coming from now. I just want to throw that on top as a little bit of frosting. It's all coming out of your now. As you revise your day, you're changing your now where all your power is. It's in your now. I don't want to get caught leaning on a supposed future that might be where the answer becomes or is going to be. Remember, not I will be, it's I am. And I am, the tense is the correct posture. The tense is now. I am the new man. We're sticking and bringing it back right to our now. I am, the present tense. Wonderful. What do I want to add? I wanted to add one more thing. During those classes, I wanted to add that I always suspected, I know I mentioned it before in another video, but I'll mention it here again too, because it's the time, quote unquote time. During those Seth classes over all those years, I always suspected there was something to do, something that I did not understand about the past. There was something, because in the beginning of learning All Time Is Now through the Seth material, I had a different time reconciling pictures. So simple. What a picture of the past represents to me, I thought that was a stone cold fact, that the past was stone and you couldn't change it because there was a picture proving, but I was only proving a probable version of a past. And it took a while to unravel that, but in that trying to understand that past, present, and future concept, I always suspected that there was a changeability that had to be present in this chemistry of understanding that all time is now, and that there is no past and there is no future. But if you understand all time is now, and in that learning process I was going through with Seth and Jane and Rob, I had to come to this area where, because I had a suspicion that there was a flexibility in these two things, past and future. Of course there is. But the past was the one I had difficulty because I thought it was already a fact, a stone. So as I began to grapple with understanding it, it never dawned on me until Neville, until this session, until this lecture, that you can actually rewrite it. I always suspected something was loose there, that something was still to be investigated. And until this exact session that I heard this very beginning of 2022, and it set me off to the races. I mean, yes, revision works. And it means the past isn't fixed. It means your pictures only represent that probable version of that man you are today. As you change, those pictures change. Literally, they change because the new man is born. Everything that goes with the old man is now gone. The new man is the birth of you. You can swear those pictures are the same, but they are not, because you're the new man. They are now a reflection of the new man. Every single picture, it will be the new man reflecting the new man you are. Don't rely on past objects to reflect who you were. That man is dead. You're now becoming, you now have become this new man. I am he. Oh, what a wonderful lecture. I don't know how to add more except that, but this is one of the most important lectures of all lectures. Listen to this as many times as necessary to get it. Listen to him, because this is a valid Neville lecture out there. Listen to that as many times as necessary. Just brand it. Just brand it right in there. The pruning shears, the pruning shears of revision. It must be learned. You must practice this. You must at least do one item and see it work. Okay, that's enough of that. We're going to see you in the next one. Neville Goddard, 1954 lectures, The Coin of Heaven. This being my last Sunday for a year, I wish to leave no doubt in your mind what I tried to tell you in the last 19 lectures. So I'm going to ask a question which you can silently answer yourself. Have you lived this life of yours in such a way that you desire to live it again? Well, if you haven't, you'd better listen very carefully to what I have to say this morning if you have not already started, for I may tell you the next life is this life. It's going to get good. When the eye is opened, you will see it. That man, unless he awakes and changes the tracks of this life, he walks them forever. So if you have not lived this life in such a way that you really desire to live it again, you start now to interfere with these tracks and laying new tracks. Let me give you just one simple little vision. These are all true visions of the speaker. Lying on my bed, suddenly the eye opened, the inner eye opened, and I saw a man casually dressed in working clothes, walking the sidewalks of a major city. As he came to a hole that was open to receive coal, in fact, the coal had just been delivered, he dropped something from his hand, and bending down, instead of picking up the thing dropped, he picked up huge hunks of coal that were scattered around the hole, and then my vision relaxed. When I reconcentrated the vision, it was on the early part of the scene of the man walking down the sidewalk. He came to the manhole, he dropped as he dropped as he had in the previous state. Bending down, he picked up the coal as he had done before. Everything was in detail. As I saw it for the second time, I said, now that scene hasn't changed one iota. My attention again relaxed, then I reconcentrated it. It was on the early part of the scene. Now I could prophesy for that man. I knew exactly what he would do every moment of time right up to that manhole, that he would drop his package and not pick it up, but pick up the coal. I knew he would look into that manhole and then change his mind, either because something below saw him pick it up and he didn't want the consequences of his action, or else he had a change of heart. But I knew in detail what that man would do. We are walking tracks, and the tracks are forever. And by the mere curvature of time, your next life is this life. You simply replay it. So if you have not so played it that you are proud of it, you start now, and you start the change today. We have given you a system by which you change it. For those who haven't heard why I say walk tracks, you are standing forever in the presence of an infinite and eternal energy, and from this energy all things proceed, but they proceed according to pattern. Energy is moving in a certain pattern, and you determine the pattern that it takes for you actually lay down these tracks within you, that energy flows over by the use of your inner conversations. This energy, I call it now mind. Follows the tracks laid down in a man's own inner talking. So if your inner conversations are not what they should be, I ask you today to start carrying on conversations within yourself from premises of fulfilled ideals. The man you want to be, the woman you want to be. And if you have failed so far to embody it, now you begin to assume that you are that man, that you are that woman, and inwardly carry on conversations with your friends, those that respect you, or those you want to respect you, and carry on these conversations from the premises that they see in you the man and the woman that you want the world to see, just as though you were. And these words, inner words, which are really the breeding ground of future action, will lay down new tracks. And then the energy which is always flowing will flow over these tracks. And the conditions and the circumstances of life will change. If you do not lay new tracks, I will prophesy for you, you will find yourself repeating it, but you will not know you've done it before. Oh boy. If I could only take you now, this is a most profound opening to any lecture, but this is basically restoration. He's describing not resurrection. He's describing a way for you to become resurrected right now, but it's restoration if you don't start laying new tracks. Laying new tracks is the way to resurrection. Not laying new tracks, not carrying on a new mindset for yourself, noble one, you're going to restore into the same repeat pattern. If I could only take you now into the inner vision with me and show you this room rising, everything rising in detail like a three-dimensional curtain ascending, but everything is moving up and yet it remains. It is so altogether automatic that it ascends every moment of time. The whole world is ascending, and it ascends, the world remains the same. And as it ascends, the world remains the same. It's almost as though not a thing has happened, and so you can't see it. But if the inner eye opens, you see it ascend, and as it leaves off, that which begins is the duplicate. The perfect duplicate of the thing that rose, and it rises in a three-dimensional manner. So that when a man goes over these tracks, he is totally unaware that he has walked them forever. You ever wonder why some things seem so familiar? If you've watched any of the original Twilight Zones, you know what I'm talking about. We used to go surfing in the summer of 1983. For some reason, that summer, the waves just didn't hit. No storms came in, but we'd go because there was no way to know if the surf was up or down. We'd get to the beach, it was flat like a lake the entire summer. So what did we do? Hung out, checked out several beaches, found nothing, drove back home. At 12 o'clock and at 12:30 was a Twilight Zone. Every single day, like clockwork, 2 episodes back to back. We watched all of those that entire summer. They were mind-blowing, and they were all along the lines of what? What's his name again? Oh, not the guy from Star Wars, the other guy. That's Gene Roddenberry's in my mind right now. It's the guy that used to go to the lectures with Lucille Ball. I can't place his name. It'll pop up in this lecture, I guarantee it. But either way, his Twilight Zones have a lot of these themes woven into them. And I could totally see that in an episode, what he just described. You don't realize you've walked them forever. And there's so many wonderful, juicy episodes, those black and white ones I'm talking about, that since he went to Neville's lectures and learned from Neville, the writer of that show, the original writer, this is what we get, is some of these themes that Neville was talking about in those episodes. I used to always wonder why they were so fascinating. I just thought they were just fascinating. I didn't know why or who wrote them. None of that ever came across my mind, who wrote them or how they come to be. They just were amazing. They were in my now. as they're in this now. So I bring you a message to make you conscious. I bring you a message to make you conscious. Man must awake from the dream where he is simply an automaton. He moves like a machine, then he begins to awake, and when he awakes, then he is not that man at all that he seemingly in the past played for eternity. He awakes into a new being, a new man. Some of you might be here just to get your SP, or to get your proper income, or to get your proper health, but you might not realize you're here for a deeper reason. I mean, on this channel and watching these lectures, listening to these lectures of Neville, you're in the right place. Now, the new man is a man of new conversations, as told you in Ephesians. Put off the former conversations. They belong to the old man that is corrupt, and put on the new man by a transformation of mind. And the new man is identified with completely new words. He speaks only the kind things. He is incapable of any unlovely thought in the world. He is incapable of even listening to the unlovely, for inwardly he speaks only the kind, only the loving things of the world. Then he finds himself awakening a man within that was asleep. He awakens the second man, which is called Jesus Christ in the Bible. Called Christ Jesus in the Bible, which I tell you now is your own wonderful, loving imagination. When imagination awakes, it is incapable of being exercised in any way outside of the loving way. So, every time you use your imagination lovingly, you are literally awakening this inner man, and you're mediating God to man. If I think of anyone in a loving way, I'm in contact with that being, and God flows toward him. Now, because this is my last Sunday, I will give you what I gave the class last Friday. Do not see it just as some metaphorical picture. See it as an actual picture. Imagine yourself at the very base of a wonderful waterfall, and that water is flowing beautifully on you, and imagine it's flowing through you, and now from you, and flowing towards someone you think of. I make this statement because it's a true statement. We are now in Eden, but we are asleep, as told you in the 2nd of Genesis. Man went sound asleep when he was placed to dress it and to keep it. To awake, do this. Just imagine yourself the center through which water radiates, and everyone in this world is rooted in me and ends in me, as I am rooted in and end in God. So, I am in God's garden. It's Eden. But in God's garden, every man in the world has a plot. A little garden. In that garden, there are trees that grow. You can see them. If I look at this man now and inwardly look at his plot in my garden, I will see the trees. Some will be called health. Some I call wealth. The tree of dignity. The tree of nobility. The tree of being wanted. They may be withered. They will never really die, but they will be withered. They are in need of water. Just imagine that you are watering that plant and see in your mind's eye the leaves appear on what formerly was a barren plant. See the fruit, and wherever he is in the world, as you water his garden, which really is your own garden. As you water it, he will embody the very qualities that the tree is now beginning to bear and radiate. You name the tree, whatever you name it, that it is. And you name this one, if you know he is unwanted, he wants to be wanted. You name it and let the water flow towards it. Imagine it's growing healthily in that garden and see it put out its leaves and see it put out its fruit. Wherever he is in the world, he will begin to be wanted by people in his world. If he is unemployed, it's a tree of employment. And see it radiate its leaves and radiate its fruit. He will be wanted and he will be gainfully employed. I tell you, this is not just an idle statement. Everyone here can do it, and everyone should do it. And wherever you water the tree in anyone's garden, at the same time, you are watering your own garden in the eternal one of God. For I am the vine, and ye are the branches. Every man can say the same thing. So as you rise here, there are 2,600 of you. You individually are the central vine of God's garden. And everyone in your world is a branch in that vine. So when I, as the central vine, water a branch in my garden, at that same moment I am being watered, and my garden is being watered in your wonderful garden. I don't have to water my own. Just by taking care of the many gardens in God's Eden, I take care of my own garden that is in the vine of everyone in the world. You try it, and you can bless everyone in the world, and then eventually the eye opens, the ear opens, the inner man awakes, and you see the most glorious world which is always here to be seen. Only we in our sleep had shut it out. We shut the whole wonderful garden out by going to sleep and becoming an automaton. But take me seriously, for your next life is this life. You make this life what you want to make it, because if you don't, you will find yourself automatically, and you won't even know it. Because as a sleeping person, you don't know you are walking the same track. But if you could only take you within me and let you see with the eye of the inner eye and watch these automatons in the world, sleeping people, yes, the eye is open and they seem awake. But they're really sound asleep, for they're repeating the same thing. Now, become conscious. As you become conscious, you enter the most glorious circle of awakened humanity. I call it the conscious circle of humanity. Or as my old teacher used to call it, the brothers. It simply means the awakened man. And when he awakes, they're all glorious beings, for they are all the images of the divine one. So try it. Try it today with the art of revision. At the end of this day, review today. If some unlovely thing in the day, don't allow it. You rewrite it. Take that same scene and rewrite it, and having rewritten it, replay it. In your imagination, you imagine the action to be unfolding, and you replay everything in the world. As you replay it, as you ought to have played it the first time, you've changed it. Truth, truth, truth. And the moment is never receding, as people think. The moment is advancing. Now, this may seem an insane statement to tell you that yesterday is today's future. It seems insane. You think it's not, it's past, but by the curvature of time, you will discover, but you will not know it, because you will be asleep unless you begin to awaken, and you will come upon what is yesteryear in your future. For the moment is never receding, it is always advancing into the future to confront us. And so if you don't change it, you will simply find yourself repeating over and over what, luckily in God's infinite mercy, that sleep shuts out the memory of it. So you are doing it and you think you're doing it for the first time. But I ask you to awake, for the purpose of this platform is to awaken everyone who comes here, that we may all enter this brotherhood of awakened humanity. Boy, oh boy, he's off to the races. Man, oh man, wow. He's leaving for a year and he's giving them some juice. Man. Oh. Now, We are told there were two gifts given to man at birth. It doesn't mean this little birth when I left my mother's womb, but when I left the womb of my father. That is the grand womb, the womb of creation when, before the world was, he created me and made me perfect and set me in this world for a purpose, educative purpose. But he gave me two gifts. He gave me his own mind, and he gave me the gift of speech. The very thing he used to create the world. Mind and speech. Neville has said elsewhere, somewhere else, that that's what separates you and me from everything else. It's just mind and speech. I say just, but it's huge. But I mean huge. It's everything. Mind and speech separates us from all the animals per se. So he spoke the world into being and then gave me the gift by which he spoke the world into being. He gave me mind and speech. If I use the gift wisely and do it rightly, I will be led into the realization, into the fulfillment of my every desire. Not one is beyond my ability to realize. If I continually use it wisely when I quit the body, as the world calls a man dead, when I leave this into another dimension by the wise use of the same two gifts, I will be brought into the company of the blessed if I awake. If I don't use it wisely, I continue my circle of sleep. If I use it wisely, I will break the circle of recurrence and rise beyond it into eternity. If I don't, I continue on the curved line of time and repeat it over and over until someday I awake, for I am destined to be conformed to the image of his Son. You're only here for a specific reason. If you're even listening to this, you're only here for a specific reason, and that is to awaken. So I have no doubt that everyone will awake, but why not start the awakening process now? And you start it by practicing the art of revision. You try it. Don't treat it idly. I ask you and I beg you to read and read over and over again the chapter. We just did the lectures on a video. The Pruning Shears of Revision. Find the book, read the chapter, same thing. Read it over and over and over. I beg you to read and read over and over again the chapter, The Pruning Shears of Revision, and take it day after day and never let the sun descend upon your wrath, any vexation, any problem of the day. Resolve it before you sleep. And before you sleep, and carry that resolved picture into sleep. And you will find the inner man awakening. But you try it with your friends, and that you are the grand waterfall. The Bible speaks of water. The mystic knows it does not mean water, it means truth. And so when I see anyone in my mind's eye and see him free, I am giving him the only truth that will set him free. Very funny coincidence. I love coincidences. This is a 1954 lecture, and we just finished a 1963 lecture, which is going to be right before this one in the way it gets published. And they're both talking about water. How is that so? A 9-year separation of time, yet the same subject. The Bible speaks of water. The mystic knows it does not mean water, it means truth. And so when I see anyone in my mind's eye and see him free, I am giving him the only truth that will set him free. So if I water his plant, imagine the water is really going to it, and I see the leaves begin to appear, and that man becoming free, he becomes healthy. He becomes secure. He becomes loved. Then those trees are growing beautifully in my garden. And so as I do that, not only will he benefit from my watering his plant, but I will benefit. I will begin to awaken. So I ask everyone here to really try it. Now, I know today the title was The Coin of Heaven, but this being the last day, I thought I would simply give a sort of quick summary of what I've tried to tell you. For the purpose behind the 19 lectures was to stimulate you to interfere with your time track, that you may do something about it, for the passage of time cannot change it. If you wait thinking there's going to be some change beyond the grave, I tell you, you will wait in vain. Too true. There is no transforming power beyond the grave. All transforming power is in man now to interfere with his time track, and you interfere with it by simply changing one moment in the course of a day, not accepting it as final, no matter how factual the day. You know you did have that experience. You don't know the day to descend upon it and say, well, I did have it. Go back to that moment in time, rewrite it, replay it in the revised version, and do it over and over in your imagination until that takes on the tones of reality. You only need to do it 1, 2, 3 times, and it already takes on those tones. It already feels as natural as the other event you're revising. But the new one is the paramount reality, is the paramount memory in your mind now. It's the new memory, but it's the one in place now. It's in front of the other one. You have to dig hard to find the other one. As it takes on the tones of reality, you have changed your future. Take another incident and change it, and keep on changing all the little episodes. All the little experiences, and make them conform to a more idealistic experience and relive it. If anyone is here for the first time, you might think, well, that's fooling yourself, but you try it. Try it and see if the inner man will not awaken, and when he awakens, you will see a world that is automatic. You will see a world that's a machine, and the whole vast world playing their parts that they've played forever, and will continue to play on the curvature of time forever, until he snaps out of it and rises from the dead. As you are told, awake you that sleep, and rise from the dead. Goodness. The state called sleep now is likened unto death, where the son has died. So we are told the second son, the prodigal, that when he returned from that cycle and he was met, the father said, he that was lost is found, and he that was dead is alive again. So this state of lostness is likened unto death, and the only purpose now is to rise, not to amass a fortune, although you are entitled to it, not to become famous, although you are entitled to it, but simply to awake from the state of sleep. And I know of no other way to awaken a man unless I can show him how mechanical he is. And if you will take and practice seriously the art of revision, the eye will open and you will have the experiences the speaker spoke of. Nothing could be truer than practicing revision every day on any one item. Then make it 2. Just do 1 a day. Just 1. Then do 2. Then do a handful. Then 2 handfuls. You're awakening a very serious, fun, exuberant part of yourself that you want awake. You too, lying on your bed, will find the eye peering into a city that may be 2,000 miles away, and there you will see more clearly than I see you now, and you will watch the tracks of a man, and then disinterest, and all of a sudden you decide to once more to be interested, and you don't have a memory image of the man. You see the whole thing all over again. You see the man walk the same sidewalk. He does everything he did a moment before. Then take it back again. That track is laid forever, and he will walk it forever until he awakes. Like an automaton. Like a robot. So I ask everyone here to take me seriously. If this seems a bit too mystical for you, I don't apologize. It's the only thing I can give you. For as I begin to awake, I've got to give you the food on which then my Father feeds me. He feeds me on new ideas. He changes my values. He changes all my meanings in the world. I don't have the same meaning I had last year. I don't have the same values I had last year. For the motives I had last year might have been a long, different line, but then all of a sudden things change, and you can't place value where you formerly placed it. So friggin' true. I mean to tell you, you just got to hold on. You're now on the roller coaster. Doing this, you're just on the ride now. It's not going back to the little house it started in. You're on the tracks. And those tracks are moving. You have to hold on. And I don't mean that you're going to repeat that ride. You're going to get on that one ride as a metaphor here, the roller coaster, because you have no control. It feels like you have no control, but you're in total control. It feels like when you leave the roller coaster house on the roller coaster, like, oh no, I gave up all control over my safety, for instance. And then you become fearful, and then you're like, oh no, it's a thrill ride, a roller coaster. It's a big thrill. This is what it feels like when you start going down this road, when you start revising continually, and you start seeing these awakenings within yourself, and you start to see how you imagine lovingly for others, and you see that wake up. You see it literally come alive in front of your eyeballs. There's nothing like it. You are awakening. It is very much a thrill ride. Big time. Just hang on. You can't place it on wealth. Let me repeat the last sentence. I don't have the same values I had last year. Very true. For the motives I had last year might have been along a different line, but then all of a sudden things change and you can't place value where formerly you placed it. You can't place it on wealth. You can't place it on names. You can't place it on recognition. All your values change, and then you begin to inwardly see a wonderful world. So I tell you, this garden of which I speak is a true garden. This you call the world. Don't believe for one moment you are in exile. This wonderful, visible, objective world of ours is not a place of exile. It's the living garment of my Father. The living garment. This world is. It really is his living garment, but it needs interpreters. Individual men come as they begin to awaken, and they will interpret for you this strange, discordant harmony. For to you, if I tell you everything in your world is related by affinity to your own mental activity, you can't see it. And so you can't quite see this discord as related to you if you don't think that way, that you know of. You weren't conscious of it. If you were conscious of the activity within you, you would see everything related to yourself, your own being. What you do not now see, you will still know it is still related. So interpreters come because the interpreter, as he begins to awaken, he knows this wonderful world has a voice for him that speaks of things behind the veil of your own mind. For behind your face right now, there's an activity of your own imagination, an activity of your own imagination. And that activity, could you see it, you would see it projected as the conditions and circumstances of your life. Not one thing is out of order. Change the activity and you change the world in which you live. And you change that activity by changing your inner speech. For speech mirrors your mind, and your mind mirrors God. If you don't change the speech, you haven't changed the activity. And if you don't change the activity, you can't change the conditions of life, for they only come bearing witness of this inner action of your mind. So, you want to change? I hope you do. But if you can now reflect upon your life, be it 10 years or be it 60 years, and you can't say within yourself, I would want to live this again if I had the freedom of choice. Then you better start right now changing it, because I make you a prophecy. I make you a promise. Your next life is this life. So if you cannot now in reflection say, I desire to live it again, then start today to lay down new tracks, because if you don't, you're going to live it again. And living it again, you won't even know you are living it again. It is so altogether automatic. It's so effortless as you walk the tracks. For you stand in the presence of energy and you can't stop walking. You've laid them and you will walk them. And the curvature of time will bring you back and back and back forever and forever until you break it and you begin to awaken. And when you awaken, you enter a circle of awkward humanity. Of awakened humanity. Durr. And I'll tell you, you know them more intimately than anyone you now know in the state of sleep, that awakened humanity that is. There is not a person on earth that you know as intimately as those who have awakened when you awake. When you go into their presence and you mingle with them, you become one. You do not lose your identity. In fact, you tend ever toward greater and greater individualization. You never become absorbed and you lose your identity. But as you awaken to the being that you always were, but you had forgotten it and went sound asleep. There is a beauty in the inner man that the outer has never touched, never scarred. And so as you awaken, and they will be there to meet you, because they are awaiting eagerly for the breaking of the circle of recurrence. So you try it. We have told you many things this year, many things that seemed too mystical, but I warned you. When I took it 4 Sundays ago, this year I would give you the end of a golden string, and I called upon you to roll it into a ball. And if you did it, it would lead, and if you did, it would lead you in at heaven's gate, built in Jerusalem's wall. He says things like he just said, and we only have 4 lectures. I think it's 4 lectures for the whole year. 1954, maybe 5. A book also, I believe. Whatever. It's only a handful, man. That's only a handful of a whole year's worth of Neville's words. As if we need more. I mean, 1 lecture could solve all riddle. All riddle could be solved with 1 lecture. Just pick one. Pick one and let it be the one, and there you have it. We've told you many things this year, many things that seemed too mystical, but I warned you when I took it 4 Sundays ago, this year I would give you the end of a golden string, and I called upon you to roll it into a ball. And if you did it, would lead you in at heaven's gate, built in Jerusalem's wall. Well, I felt I have given you that string, but I cannot roll it into a ball for you. I promise you I will water your garden, but it won't awaken you. It will awaken you only to lovelier things in a way, but it will not really break the circle for you. So I offer you now this day the end of a golden string, but I call upon you to wind it and roll it into a ball by the daily application of the principles of revision. By daily watching your interactions and see if they correspond to the actions you desire to perform in the outer world. Watch your conversations carefully. Are they from premises of fulfilled ideas? If they are not, go back and make them actually correspond to the ideal you want to embody in this world. Create new, revision, those conversations that befit the you who you want to embody in this world. Start. That is winding it into a ball and it will lead you in at heaven's gate built in Jerusalem's wall. I have no doubt in my mind, for I know from experience that's how I opened up that wall. I opened it up by application. So I warned you every time I have taken the platform that the knowledge you have now is of no avail unless it's applied. A little knowledge, if carried out in action, is more profitable than much knowledge which you neglect to carry out in action. If you had all the knowledge in the world and you didn't put it into practice, excuse me, you wouldn't awaken. Now, here, this morning, everyone has heard it. You take it today and you start this day revising. You start this day revising. And watch the circle begin to snap. Watch the eye begin to open. And I'll tell you, there isn't a gift on earth, there isn't a possession in the world that you would want more than the opening of the eye when the eye opens. That's why I say your values change. The meaning of life changes. For you wouldn't sell the eye that opens for all the wealth of the world. You wouldn't exchange it for any recognition in the world now conferred upon the so-called great. You see the so-called great all equally sound asleep, playing their parts, walking curved lines. And then you snap it and move it into a wonderful world of awakened humanity. And there you see these glorified beings, but really glorified beings, who preceded you into the conscious circle of humanity. And now my time is up. Oh my goodness. Oh man. Called The Coin of Heaven, 1954 lecture, should be called something else entirely. Oh my gosh, that is a very, very profound lecture. I mean, it's another one of those, let me lay back in the hammock moments. Let's go into the silence right now. This must be played again. If you just played it, start it again. This is a most amazing lecture. I am. Oh my gosh, there's so many gems in here. I don't even know where to start. The golden string alone. The eye that opens is your eye now open. As Neville said, I hope it is. I see it open. Oh my goodness gracious. This was a good one. Okay, we're going to see you in the next one. Neville Goddard, 1954 lectures. 3 propositions. Well, my first proposition is this one. The individual state of consciousness determines the conditions and the circumstances of his life. The second proposition is that man can select the state of consciousness with which he desires to be identified. And the third follows naturally. Therefore, man can be what he wants to be. Wunderbar. If the first proposition is true, that the individual state of consciousness is the sole cause of the phenomena of his life, then the normal natural question is asked, why doesn't he change it to a more desirable state if he could change it? Well, that is not as easy as it appears. Today we hope to give you a technique to make it easier, but man finds it very hard to leave the things to which he has grown accustomed. Habit. We are all grown, stuck in the habitual. I didn't even know he was going there, but I knew he was going there. It may seem strange, but a very sordid cartoon appeared years ago, that is, during the last war. You might have seen it. It came out in the New Yorker, and it was won by George Price. It is in one single little room, a sink piled high with unwashed dishes, plaster falling from the walls, and these two middle-aged people, she sitting on a chair reading a letter, disheveled, matted hair, and he with torn clothes and feet stuck upon the table, and socks exposing holes. And the caption of the picture is this: she is reading a letter from her soldier son abroad. He says he's homesick. Now, you should see the interior of this house, one room, completely disheveled, but the lad was homesick. Now, man finds it difficult to detach himself from the habitual. So this morning we have brought you to these three propositions, and I hope I can make it clear that you can, with this knowledge, apply it so that you can realize your every objective. Now, I'm here to tell you, man, I am just, like I say over and over, I've just did 3 hardcore years of serving Neville into my brain. Every nook and cranny in there and out here, completely washing back and forth. I think in hindsight, the biggest thing I've had to overcome, and I've had a lot of challenges in that 3 years, and I've seen some pretty big things come about. The biggest one to overcome is what he's talking about right here, right now. Habit. You don't realize how much of a creature of habit you are until you try to change with desire, intent, and enthusiasm. Until you try to change, you don't realize your habits and how firmly either they have a hold of you or you are using them, which of course the latter is obvious. You're using the habits, but you don't realize how embedded you can do yourself in with habits. It feels so good where I'm sitting right now. I am just wide open, like, I don't care what's next. I just like like Neville in that last session, the lecture where he was in the dream body, but he wanted to go back to his wife and his daughter because the daughter had some college to attend to and things like this. It's like he was off to an adventure because he had this explorative, I'm going to explore. I don't care what it takes. Even if I leave my body behind, I'm going exploring. That's the nature of what is before you when you start to break those ironclad habits. You're in this nature of not leaving your body. It's going into a newness. Everything's new all the time. You can see things for the temporariness that they are. In your 1, 2, 3, 4-fold visions, you see things for the temporary that they really are. So we're getting into a good subject here, habit. Very, very good. I would say in hindsight of all that I've gone through and changed and all my previous metaphysical stuff, and then you come into this 3 years of Neville, now I'm in my 4th year. The biggest one, the biggest one to deal with has been habit, for sure. Okay, we're moving forward. It is the height of folly to expect changes to come about by the mere passage of time. For that which requires a state of consciousness to produce its effect could not be effective without such a state of consciousness. So if I must be in the consciousness of the thing that I am seeking before I find it, then the only thing to do is to acquire that state of consciousness. Most of us do not even know what we mean by the state of consciousness. To those who are here for the first time, it is simply meant by state of consciousness the sum total of all that a man believes and accepts and consents to as true. Now, it need not be true. It may be, but it need not be true. It could be false. It could be a half-truth. It could be a lie. It could be a superstition. It could be a prejudice. But the sum total of all that a man believes constitutes his state of consciousness. It is the house in which he abides. And as long as he remains in that house, similar problems will confront him. The circumstances of life will remain the same. He may move physically across the ends of the earth, but he will encounter similar conditions. He can't get away from the house in which he abides. The Bible speaks of these houses as mansions of the Lord. It speaks of them as cities. It speaks of them as rooms, as upper rooms. All kinds of words are used to describe individual states of awareness. And the appeal in the Bible is always to move out and occupy the upper story, meaning to move up to a higher level within oneself. Now, if you do not know the state in which you abide, it's a very simple technique you may employ to discover that state. For the man dwelling in a state, and we all dwell in states, could easily discover the state by listening within himself, by listening within himself and observing his own internal mental conversations. For the state is singing its own song, and it reveals itself in man's inner speech. If you will listen attentively and uncritically to what inwardly you are saying, you will discover the state. And it will not surprise you that things are as they are, for you will hear within yourself the cause of the phenomena of life. Oh boy, how rich can this get? So that what you are inwardly saying and doing is far more important than what you outwardly know or seemingly outwardly express. So when a man knows what inwardly he is doing, then he can change it. If you have never uncritically observed your reactions to life, if you are totally unaware of your subjective behavior, then you are unaware of the cause of the things in your world. But if you become aware of the state, then you simply go about changing it. Here's a technique. Now, here is a technique I have found most helpful, and I find that it works like a miracle. Anyone can do it. I know that some of you here possibly come from extreme orthodox walks of life, and it may seem strange to you even to be here. But I assure you, you are not alone. Many of your leaders in the Orthodox field seek an audience with the speaker. Many a rabbi has been in my home, many a priest, and many a Protestant leader. Many of them. They come to my home for interpretations of the book that publicly they wouldn't dare give any interpretation other than the most extreme, literal interpretation. So don't be surprised if you hear things here that might startle you. Your leaders are startled, but this is a technique I have found most helpful. First of all, man stands forever in the presence of an infinite and eternal energy, from which energy all things proceed, but it follows definite patterns. It just doesn't move out of man and crystallize in things in some strange haphazard manner. It follows a definite track, and the track it follows is laid down by the man himself in his own internal conversations. You could hear them. You just hear them from people. You hear. So though a man is called upon to change his thinking that he may change his world, for we are told, be ye transformed by the renewal of your mind, man can't change his thinking unless he changes his ideas, for he thinks from his ideas. So if I would change and become transformed, I must lay new tracks, and the tracks I lay are always laid down in my own internal conversation. So what am I saying now when seemingly I am alone? I can sit in that chair or stand here or walk the streets and I can't stop talking. Man does not realize that he is talking because he is never still enough to listen to the voice speaking within himself. But inwardly he is whispering what outwardly is taking place as conditions and circumstances. You can see it. Most of the things he whispers are negative in justifying his behavior. There's no need to justify. Remember, I said before, never, this is a good habit to instill in yourself, never explain, justify, or defend, ever. There's never any need to do that. Never explain, never justify, and never defend. There's no reason to do that. Just don't do it. Most of the things he whispers are negative in justifying his behavior. There's no need to justify. He is excusing delay or excusing failure. Or he is arguing, or he is judging harshly, or he is condemning. Many of us have secret affection for hurts. We don't want to be liked by certain people. We just wouldn't like it if they liked us. We just don't want certain things to take place in our world, even though they may bring a greater comfort and a greater satisfaction. Man has a peculiar, strange feeling, a little affection for the feeling of being unwanted or the feeling of being hurt, and he likes to talk about it. Well, try to pull that man out of that habitual state. It would be just as difficult as to keep that soldier boy away from that sordid room. He goes back into the sordid rooms within himself. You don't use dishes unwashed within yourself. But if you could only see the internal psychological state in which most of us abide, we would see a room far dirtier than the one that George Price illustrated in the New Yorker magazine. They are all unwashed plates within us. On the outside, we wash them, but we are told in the Bible, we leave the inside unwashed and we become whited sepulchres. Now, if I sincerely desire to change my world, there's no one in my world I need to change but myself. So that I don't need to change you as an individual, but I do need to change my attitude towards you. If you dislike me, or if I think you dislike me, or if your behavior offends me, the cause of my offense is not in you and your behavior, but I must look for that cause within myself. Now, if I seriously and I am honest about my search, I will find it, and I will find that inwardly, when I think of you, it is never a pleasant conversation that I carry on with you. So let me sit down now and bring you before my mind's eye. And as I bring you before my mind's eye, let me imagine a conversation which would imply a radical change in my world. Let me bring you up and change my attitude toward you by laying new tracks relative to you. These tracks will then become the tracks across which this eternal energy will pour, an energy which is only thinking. Moving across the tracks laid down in my own inner conversations will result in changes in my outer world. Now, if I repeat the conversations and do it more often, then it becomes a habit, and I will find that when I am about my Father's business in the outer world, I am inwardly, through habit, carrying on these changed and lovelier conversations. Now, a transformation of consciousness will definitely result in a change of environment and conditions. But I mean transformation of consciousness. I do not mean a slight alteration of consciousness, like a change of mood. It is nice to change It is nice to change a mood from some unlovely to a lovely. But I want a transformation, and by transformation, I mean that when one state into which I have moved and moved so often that it becomes a habit, and that state grows stable so that it expels from my consciousness all of its rivals, then that central habitual state defines my character and really constitutes my new world. It spells out a transformation. But if I only do it a little bit and return to my former state, then I might have had a temporary lift, but I will not notice radical changes in my outer world. I will notice these changes in my outer world if inwardly I truly have changed. Yes. Then without effort on my part, I will find the outer world changing to correspond to the changes that take place within me. Yes, 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 and yes. You got to have an open mind. You have to keep your mind open, because when those changes happen you're going to see a lot of different things on the outside. People are going to change. Everything's different. You're in the same place, but the definitions are different. It's wonderful. Keep pushing. It's wonderful. Hang in there. Keep imagining. It's wonderful. Keep pushing. So you bear it in mind. I can't stress it too often. I can't give it too great importance, this wonderful thing called man's ability to talk within himself and without the aid of anyone in the world. Sitting alone at home, you can construct a sentence which would imply the fulfillment of the ideal. You can construct a sentence which would imply that a friend I blessed, that she has realized her objective, that the thing she wants, she has. So what would you say? What would she say to you had she realized it? Well, you listen attentively as though you heard, and you will really hear. If you are still enough, you will hear as coming from without what really you are whispering within yourself, from within yourself. It's very much it's just a small little bit of perception. You will hear it coming from you. After a while, it's always coming from you. Very, very, very important point right there. Man is this wonderful temple in which all the work takes place, and the outer world is only a projection of the work done within himself. Couldn't be a better sentence to say next. This, called present man, unfortunately, is asleep. It is told us so beautifully in the Bible that Adam slept in the 2nd chapter of Genesis. He was placed into a profound sleep from which he has not been awakened. There's no reference in the Bible where Adam was ever awakened from his sleep, but there is a reference where he awoke, but not as Adam. He awoke as a second man called Christ Jesus. So in Christ, they awake. In Adam, they sleep. But a man who is totally unaware of the mental activity that goes on within him as the one who sleeps, as Adam, he doesn't know it. He walks with his eyes wide open. He may be a very important person in the world. He may be wealthy. He may be famous. He may be all the things that you admire. But if he is totally unaware of that mental activity, with which is the cause of the phenomena of his life, that man is sound asleep and is personified as Adam. And he will read his Bible and think it's a literal story. He will read where Adam was put to sleep, and from Adam a rib was taken and a woman was formed called Eve. But when a man begins to awake, he realizes that this symbolical Eve of the Bible is only his own emanation, now called by the name of nature. And nature is his slave and must fashion life about him as he fashions it within himself, of course. But if he is asleep, he fashions it in confusion, but he fashions it anyway. For he uses the very technique that his father used to build a world. He uses speech. He uses inner talking. And that's how this whole vast world was brought into being. So he uses the same technique. He has speech and he has mind. But in the state of sleep, he brings about strange conditions. And he doesn't know he's the cause of the strange conditions round about him. As he begins to awake, then he awakes only as one being. He awakes as Christ Jesus. And the thing being called Christ Jesus, personified in our Gospels, is simply the awakened, loving imagination. Imaginative love, where only love guides, it is incapable of hearing anything but the lovely. Delicious. That sentence is wonderful. Feel that sentence. Just take it in. Let it rest on you, in you. Let it bring you out of you. Here it is. Imaginative love, where only love guides, let me read. Imaginative love, where only love guides, it is incapable of hearing anything but the lovely. When that being begins to awaken, he doesn't see things in pure objectivity. He sees everything subjectively related to himself. He is incapable of meeting a stranger. He may meet one for the first time, but he knows it is not really a stranger, that the man had no power to come into his world save he, from within himself, drew him. No man comes unto me save I call him. No man takes away my life, I lay it down myself. You didn't choose me, I have chosen you. Though you seemingly come now for the first moment in my life, you still didn't choose me. I have chosen you. I see then every being subjectively related to myself. So in that state, you become incapable of hurt. You've overcome all the violence that's formerly you've expressed in the world when you were asleep. There is no condemnation to the sleeping man. He is dreaming, confusion, because he doesn't know who he is. But he begins to awake by such techniques as given you this morning. If you take this technique and you try it consciously, for here I am appealing not to the passive mind that passively surrenders to appearances, I am appealing to the Christ in you, which is the active, conscious use of your lovely imagination. So when you sit down and you predetermine what you want to hear, and you listen until you hear it, and you refuse to hear anything other than that, then you are using the one power in the world that awakens a man, and you are using your lovely imagination, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. Here is a lady this past week. She has heard the story of revision. Her husband calls her, and it's a big deal. It runs into a fortune. He had sent off 600 feet of film to Acme, and they've returned the film. Only the first 300 were good. The second were duds. The second 300 were duds, as they call it. Not a thing was on it, a complete blank. Yet they were up against time. That 600 feet of film had to be on a plane headed for Chicago in the immediate present. Less than 12 hours away, it had to be there. That was the contract. And 300 feet of film taken, no sound appeared, with the whole thing a blank. She sat down when her husband called her, desperately called her. She sat on the bed just where she had received the call, put the receiver up, and sat in the silence until she heard within herself that phone ringing, and across that wire the same voice, but now not an anxious voice, but a tender, loving voice, which was her husband. He was explaining that the whole thing had been resolved. Remember, now this is in her imagination. They had found what seemingly they had lost forever. She sat in the silence for 1 hour and 10 minutes. And there she listened. And she listened until her whole body became still in hearing only what she wanted to hear. And an hour and 10 minutes later, while still in the silence, the phone rang. It's her husband calling to say that Acme just called him to explain and excuse themselves. It was their mistake. They had found the missing 300 feet of film. And there was not a dud. It wasn't a blank. The whole thing was perfect. – How much time would you invest Now, the average person not knowing this law of revision, or even knowing it, or even those knowing it, would have accepted as final the evidence of sense, and receiving news that seemed so factual, they would have gone into a stew, bawling out Acme, and pulled all kinds of wires to correct it. But she heard and she acted upon it. And that's what I mean when I tell you that a little knowledge, if you carry it out in action, will be far more profitable than much knowledge which you neglect to carry out in action. Now, many of you present, and this is no judgment, you have the same knowledge that this lady has. She's been coming here recently, but she heard, she attended all the meetings at the Ebel, and she's been here. Undoubtedly, she's here this morning, but at least she came the first 2 Sundays, and she hasn't missed one at the Ebel. And having heard the art of revision, she acted upon it. Others heard the art of revision. Have you acted upon it? Did you last night allow the sun to descend upon your wrath? Did you sleep last night with any trouble, any vexation unresolved? Or did you last night truly go to bed having resolved every vexation and trouble of the day? All the little problems, each one must be resolved. You rewrite the play. If you didn't rewrite yesterday's events and make them conform to the ideal you wish you had experienced, then you heard, but you aren't a doer. And so you are told in the Bible, would that ye be doers of the word and not mere hearers only? For if you are a hearer and not a doer, then you are like a man who sees his face in the glass and turns and straightway forgets what manner of man he is. But if you are a doer and not a forgetful hearer, then you shall be blessed with the deed, for you will look into the law of liberty, and you will liberate yourself, and liberating yourself, you shall be blessed with the deed. For those of you who are Bible students and want to check it, read the book of James. You will find that story in the 1st chapter of the Epistle of James, where he looks in and liberates himself. Well, she liberated herself by listening until she heard exactly what she wanted to hear. And she heard it 1 hour and 10 minutes later. Now, the majority of people, I say, they would not have acted upon it. Through habit, they would have gone into a stew. They would have fumed and fretted. And that very day, had he brought home the negative news that undoubtedly he would have, they both would have slept, allowing the sun to descend upon their wrath. But now you know that there's not a thing on the outside to change. The first proposition is true. That the man's state of consciousness, which simply means all that he accepts, all that he believes, all that he consents to, that and that alone is the cause of the phenomena of his life. Man can change his state of consciousness, and therefore man can determine the conditions of his life. But the passage of time will not in itself do anything. Time is only a facility for changes in experience, but it cannot produce the change. Very, very important point. It is simply that which allows changes to take place, but it cannot produce them. Space gives us facility for experience and time for changes in experience, but of themselves they do nothing. We must operate the power. And so the individual, if he doesn't become the operator, then he will wait in vain. Where do you operate the power? In your imagination. So no one here this morning, in fact, no one coming here through the year, should ever allow himself to blame another, ever allow himself to justify failure. For he is only betraying his own lack of the use of the law. Anyone that you listen to who is complaining of a third party, he has no idea how he is betraying himself. He is telling you of his own unwashed dishes within himself, but he doesn't know it. He thinks it is the one that he is now judging. But as he talks to you, listen attentively and see what must be washed within him, and you aid him. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. In your mind's eye, rewrite that script that you heard, and when you leave him, just imagine you heard a more lovely conversation than the one you did hear. Just rewrite it for him. And in some strange way, lift him up within you, for that's your task. It's my task. We aren't here to condemn. We are here to redeem. Remember, Neville vocabulary, redemption means radical change of attitude. Redeem is a change of attitude. Redeem or redemption means a radical change of attitude. We aren't here to condemn, we are here to redeem. Having awakened, we have found Christ in us as our own imagination, and so our duty, as it is said, Christ's duty is to do the will of him that sent me, and the will of him that sent me is that of all that he has given me I should lose nothing, but I shall raise it up again, and raise it up by encountering someone and then finding him down. I raise him up within myself. I simply hear what I want to hear from him. Now my voice you are hearing this morning, you could take the tone, listen attentively, and you will hear this tone within you. When you hear the tone within you, then put upon that tone the word that you want to hear. And having put it upon it, listen and do not move until you hear this tone conveying these words, but make them noble. Don't take that tone and put upon it any word outside of the word, which would imply a dignified, noble state, because you are not hurting anyone but self. If you take someone and you put words upon that tone or that voice, and the words do not imply a noble spirit, then you are only allowing that being to be down within you. You are not really performing your duty. What comes with this knowledge is responsibility. There is no shirking responsibility. You're not just going to get into this and go, oh, I'm going to make myself wealthy, or I'm going to make myself married, or I'm going to make myself healthy, and then everyone else can piss off. Right. Let me know how that goes. I'm very excited to hear the news. So here this morning, believe these propositions, and then having believed them, do something about it. Go out and take what we have told you concerning inner speech. It is truly the greatest of the arts. Seth said that as well, of the Seth, Jane, and Rob fame. He said the one art, I don't think he said it was lost, but I think it was his favorite, was the art of conversation. I think that's what Seth said was his favorite of all the arts, was conversation. Go out and take what we've told you concerning inner speech. It is truly the greatest of the arts. You listen and only hear what you want to hear. You take your imaginary hand and put it into the hand of a friend, the imaginary hand of a friend, and there you congratulate him on his good fortune. If you want one to congratulate you, you allow yourself to be congratulated. You don't bend the head, you hold it high, and you accept the congratulations. And when you congratulate him, imagine that he is fully conscious and of the good that is already his, and he accepts that congratulation, and make the contact real. There has to be contact. You don't do this without making contact. Period. That is truly entering the kingdom of heaven. For you enter the kingdom, and the kingdom is within you. It's not without. And you always enter the kingdom by a loving, knowing communion. You can enter the kingdom at every moment of time, ride the streetcar, ride the buses, and with all the talking and gossiping, you can enter the kingdom and bless a friend by just imagining the friend is with you and you are putting your hand into his and congratulating him on the good news you heard concerning him. And listen as though he answered in kind, and in that moment you've actually blessed him. He may be 1,000 miles away, but from that moment on, things begin to stir within his world, for you have brought about a change within the structure of his mind. And every modification of the structure of a man's mind must result in corresponding outer changes. How hard is it to share the love? How hard is it to share the love? You've got an infinite supply. I keep bringing up Seth, but he said one thing that was very profound. It stuck with me. Whenever you use a facility, you have more of it to use. Sharing that idea with this, the more love you give, the more you have to give. It should be obvious. Let's make it obvious. So you bring about these lovely changes within you. Look at the testimonial, one you heard this morning. Here's a pile of letters, and this is really a tight pile. It's one of the biggest piles I think you have received here. And this week's mail, I can't begin to tell you what a thrill it is to receive. One after the other, not begging for help anymore, but giving praise and thanks for the principle that brought the help into their world. I can't tell you how many in the last 2 weeks have received an increase in income, increase in positions, a better state of health. Things happened because they did something about it. They were not just warming a seat here on Sunday morning and waiting for things to happen by association. They produced the thing by producing it first within themselves. So here, this appeals to men who are big enough to stand on their own feet, men who want spiritual meat and who have gotten and who have outgrown the milk given to sleeping man. So if you want the literal concept, you are still asleep, and this really would not be the place to get it. For from this platform, you are going to be given meat, spiritual meat, for you must go out and do something about it. If you have the greatest knowledge in the world concerning foods and you didn't eat, you would die of starvation. And so it's not the knowledge of it, it's the application of it that counts. Now, this coming week, we start tomorrow, and it's an interesting one for those who like their Bible, those who would like to put their mental teeth into it tonight, and come tomorrow night, and with some intuitive knowledge of it, it's the 49th chapter of Genesis. You'll find many of them, I'll quote tomorrow, but in the 49th of Genesis, here's what it says. First of all, he calls his sons together to tell them their future, and there are 12 of them. It's Jacob calling his sons, but the fifth one, when he calls the fifth one, he tells him the scepter shall never drop, shall never depart from your hand, never, not in eternity. His name is Judah, the one that fathered the line that flowered in Christ Jesus. When you read the genealogy as given to us in Matthew and Luke, then it is said of Judah that he took his foal and he tied it to a vine, and he took the colt of an ass and he tied it to a good vine, and then he washed his garments in wine, and he washed his clothes in the blood of grapes, and his eye was red with wine and his teeth white with milk. Well, now, those of you who still would like to read that literally, you may get some satisfaction out of washing your clothes in wine. I don't. I'd rather drink it. But some wash theirs in the blood of grapes, and then the teeth white with milk and the eye bloodshot with wine. Well, now, that was the one who fathered out of Thamar, the twins that brought forth the line that flowered in Christ, Jesus. So go back and read the genealogy of Judah, and then you see what Judah did and how he took two animals, One was a foal and one was a colt. Now, I won't tell you the interpretation. You exercise your own intuitive faculty, and you come tomorrow night and you hear what we have to say about the amethyst or the wine stone. How a man must make the amethyst. How a man must take his garments, a thing that clothes the mind of man, and wash them in the blood of grapes. How a man not only must do it, but his eye must become equally bloodshot with wine, and his teeth white with milk. And we will show you tomorrow night why they placed upon him the scarlet robe, and then placed upon him the most mystical of all, the purple robe. So they placed them up to the very final act, was the placing of the purple robe upon the man who had awakened, who is now ready to ascend on high to higher levels within himself. But you can't ascend until you first make the purple robe. And although we have orders in this world who have scarlet robes and purple robes, no man can make it for you. Also, it cannot be woven in any factory. It has to be woven from the factory within yourself. So tomorrow night, for those who are vitally interested in going deeper into the mysteries, our subject is the 12th, an amethyst. The very last act of a man, the 12th. For there are only 12, then comes the most. I would say the least precious of all stones in the eyes of man. But in the eye of God, it is the most precious. And it's not the little thing you find among the stones. It's the one you find within yourself. So that's tomorrow's subject. Whoo, man, he's putting down a good commercial for the next night. We don't have that lecture. I will look that one up, though. Maybe I'll bring it to the front if I find it, the 12th and amethyst. I'm not certain if that is. It's not in the 1954 stack because this is the last of the 1954 stack. So maybe he did do it later. We'll find out. What a great, great lecture, man. Do they get better and better, or are we just opening more and more? Are we becoming more wise? Is our wisdom showing? Are we hearing more? How are we breathing this in differently? Are we willing to let go of some habits? Change some habits, Actually, literally just change them. Change them from these to these. Changing from consenting and accepting to creating, to imagining lovingly, actively imagining lovingly. And watch what happens. Just watch the results flower right in front of you. Go into your own silence. I'll go into mine. And we'll see you in the next one.